see what the content actually looks like. And also one thing we also did that helped was we started our self-contained as well as all of our special education teachers taught both self-contained as well as co-taught. And they were always in a co-teaching class with that core content area. So let's take, when I had Mr. Bigelow doing geometry, he co-taught with Ms. Humander, who was the core teacher. So he would see the lessons, and then he was also the self-contained geometry.
He was self-contained for like CD or ED, or what was he?
In Chicago, everything was, we didn't do the pull-out units. At one point, like when I was growing up, there was a difference between ED and, CD, but everything was just together. It was just, you were self-contained, inclusive. So it was in those buckets.
I guess, I could see with the CD and the ED unit. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of self-contained. But we kind of got pushed into it this year for compliance issues. The NH and autistic, I guess I struggle with them because some of their kids, I don't know if you've ever visited one of our MH or autistic units.
No, I don't think I have.
It's so different what they, it's really a functional curriculum. Some of the students aren't even verbal. You got students that are deaf, blind, nonverbal. So the curriculum is so different from everybody else that I don't know what to do with them. They comply, they do the meetings, and there's some use to it. We worked a little bit on assessment but they already differentiate pretty well.
Yeah.
Like they're pretty strong units. So I kind of wonder how much use they get out of it, and whether or not I'm just having them do it because it's easier for me to say that they're all doing it, or if there was something else. I agree. I think the CD ED might benefit from being paired with the other teachers. That would be a good change. But MH autistic,
Yeah. And actually, I'm going to write that down just as a note to see what schools that are doing that effectively, how it actually looks like. And that is a good question. And in our school, we didn't have, there were clusters, just like there are here, clusters where there are those, different MH units, those severely profound, and those, the educational needs are completely different.
Yeah.
So having them do, this type of process under the same type of curriculum is, in some ways, could be a waste of time. But I do
what else
think,
do you have them do?
Yeah, well, I do think there's a power in the collective of this, of still having them come together, but they may need a little bit more guidance in terms of what they're looking at and what types of data they're looking at. And so that may be something where we get Jessica Baldwin in to think about how that actually works, but it may not be a good use of their time when they're clustered with the other content areas, or even with the ED and CD units.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm starting to think.
Yeah, they're together, and they're still doing this process, but they're really looking at discrete skills, looking at what progress looks like for their students, what rigor looks like for their students. And I can help you think about that.
Yeah, I would like that because, again, they're doing it. But I just feel like it's more compliance than it is purposeful. Yeah. And I don't have, frankly, I just don't have the expertise in that area to really move that team the way they need to be moved. It's just, it's so, you're talking about the objective for the lesson might have been counting basic change. And how do you do that with a kid that's deaf, blind, not verbal, so it might be he's just sorting. And then you've got another kid who's capable of counting it out and giving you a tally. But just thinking about how do you differentiate that? How do you support that? What sort of work do you do with the ones that didn't get it the first time? Yeah. I feel like that's a pretty distinct skill set. Yeah. And I'm not sure we have it in-house to really support.
Yeah. And what you may even start to do to facilitate, just like you facilitated this process through the PD where the teachers came up with that sheet. These teachers that you have there teaching, the MH units, they may not be as effective, but they went to school for this area, so there are some strategies that they know, and it could be a thing where you or Mr. Taylor are leading these meetings, but you're really just leveraging these strategies and saying, hey, let's see what are the best strategies to work for math, what are the best strategies to work for English, testing them out, and then using the TBT to try it and see, okay, was this effective? Right. And it's starting really at a lower level. It's not as fast paced, but you're still using that to help them plan, and then they can really see it as a useful part of their time.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. All right. Well, a couple of last questions I have before we wrap up here. So, You showed me, you know, how you're utilizing the TBTs, and you just look at your goal once again. So yeah, you mentioned, you know, the 10th grade performance index. You wanted to increase from 67.3 to 74. So you showed me through the TBTs. Teachers are starting to do it. You're able through the forms to identify gaps in the teacher's learning and also identify gaps in the student's learning. How are you tracking the, not just the implementation of the TBT process, but how are you tracking the efficacy of this process to impact the student results that you want in your opens?
I mean, largely through the assessment results that are generated. So after each assessment cycle, they submit a grid. I don't know if I got one here. They submit it via email, so it's color coded. But one or two did not follow directions this time. But they'll submit scores for the most recent assessment, and you know, it's broken down by standard, multiple choice, short answer. And what I've been doing is I've been capturing the mastery percentage on the multiple choice and measuring it from exam to exam.
Yeah.
And we did a PD at the beginning of the year just talking about assessment and what a strong assessment looks like and the sources that they could use to generate it. And we've been pretty explicit. ODE, Study Island, or Springboard is what we're looking for. And we've asked that they just be consistent from administration to administration. Now, there have been one or two that have come to me and asked to adjust. But by and large, like, they've been using the same vendors. You know, it has to be obviously aligned exactly with scope and sequence. Spiraled, you know, continue to use trouble questions from the previous ones, the ones that they've recovered in the bridge week. And just looking at growth or progress from assessment to assessment. So that's how we've been measuring it. And that's why, you know, I mentioned, for example, like the English group that I worked with last time. You know, they showed pretty healthy gains from one to the other. And, you know, the notion is, I mean, NWA helps us get a sense of how they're going to do on the OGT.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm also looking at this, and I keep telling them, like, the rigor needs to be commensurate with what they're going to see on the OGT or PARC. Because if they're achieving mastery levels of 50, 55, 60%, then that's probably how they're going to do when they take this exam.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's kind of what we're looking for, and we're looking to see growth from beginning to end on these assessments. So, you know, we're really pushing them to keep the assessments rigorous. And that's how we're measuring, you know, readiness toward the goal. Now, from assessment 1 to assessment 2, our overall mastery rate stayed pretty flat. But it was interesting because the biggest declines came in the electives, and the cores all moved up. So I think part of that was the electives did a better job of making their assessments a little more rigorous. You know, because for a lot of them, they don't have like a really good, I mean, look, in urban agriculture, there's not, in SchoolNet or on ODE's website, there's not an assessment that they can build.
Yeah.
You know, so they have to kind of use other materials to create. And I think that part of what happened was the first one was fairly discrete because it was just what they'd covered in the first 3 weeks. You know, and the second one, because it was cumulative, there was a lot more material. And I think as a result, the scores kind of dropped. So that was something I wasn't overly concerned about. Now, if it drops again, I'll be a little worried. But for the electives to drop and the cores to move, I was okay with that.
Yeah.
And by and large, the cores all showed pretty healthy gains. So I'll be looking to see how they do on this one, so I can compare, you know, across 3 tests now. Now math, our 9th grade math did use the online assessment last time. So theirs was kind of interesting because they went from Springboard to SchoolNet because there were some issues, I think, with the Springboard, and then to the vendor assessment in SchoolNet. 9th grade English is talking about using the SchoolNet one as well for their semester final. window for that is going to stay open for a while, right?
Yeah, it's going to be from December. I think it's going to be December 4th through the 19th. And then
Okay, good.
one thing I'll also let you guys know, I was telling Mr. Taylor about this, about the assessments that I purchased for the team. So, you know, as we wrap up, I'll tell you what I'll need for you guys on that. But what's going to be great about those assessments is they're directly aligned to the ACT and Common Core. And some of the skills you'll see some overlap in terms of what teachers are working on, but it's really going to change your perspective in terms of when you're looking at that 9th grade test and the skills are in the band of 16 and 19 and how students are really doing. So students that are still scoring 30% on that, that lets you know at this point our students are still not mastering those ACT skills from the 13, 15, and then not even the 16 and 19. Students that are about 80%, that lets you know, okay, these 9th graders are on pace for scoring about a 16 to 19, and that's about where you want them at the 9th grade level, or if we did the Explore, Plan, ACT kind of cycle here. So that's something we'll be taking in December as a network. Yeah, so the last thing I need here before I just share 2 last things with you, just want to know when I can come in to observe you facilitate a TBT.
So we have two meetings here before, 2 I think, before the Christmas break.
Okay.
Next Wednesday and the Wednesday that follows.
Okay.
Now I know that the state is coming in one of those days, so I don't know if you want to be here on the same day or not. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. Let me look up what date she's coming. She's been here once, and you know she gave us some feedback, and that's when we did the step 3, step 4
Yeah.
retraining. Yeah, she's planning to be here on the 10th.
On the 10th? Okay.
So we've got meetings on the 3rd and the 10th.
Okay.
So I don't know if you've got a preference for which one you want to
Well, what
attend.
time are they held on those?
They're always at 3:10.
At 3:10?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I could do the 10th. I know that, so will she primarily be leading it, the person coming from the state? or
She's just observing.
Oh, just observing? Okay,
She's
yeah.
just observing.
I could come on that date. So I'm going to put 3 o'clock on the 10th. And I'm doing Mr. Taylor on the 11th, so this works. So,
Okay.
And typically I can do the post right, you know, right after, or you know, maybe the next day, just depending on how much notes and everything. So I'm gonna block this time. It probably won't take all this time, but I'll block it till 5.
Okay.
The observation portion is about just 45 minutes, but I'm just blocking that amount of time if you do the post right afterward. And that you guys have your meetings here, right?
Yeah, it's right in the 2nd floor cafeteria.
All right. Is there anything in particular, as I observe, is there anything other than just the piece of feedback I'll be looking at related to 1.2 and the whole process? Is there anything that you want me to look for in terms of like presentation style, other things that you want feedback on?
No, I mean, when those meetings, I mean, I usually kind of just situate myself as part of the team.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't necessarily take the lead in terms of presenting the data because it's not my data, but I try to be more of a thought partner. So, I mean, I guess, if you just kind of want to look at the type of feedback I'm giving them and where I need to be pushing more and maybe back off, it's kind of like you know how it goes, it's kind of a delicate balance, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't wanna take control of the meeting and do all the work, because